What if I told you that some people right now are building fully functional, off-grid homes for under $50,000 using old tires, glass bottles, and dirt? And that the concept has been around since the 1970s, got ignored for decades, and is now making one of the most unexpected comebacks in modern housing? Stick with me until the end of this video because I am going to break down exactly why Earthships are having a massive moment in 2026, what they actually cost to build, what nobody tells you about the challenges, and whether this could genuinely be a solution for the housing crisis that keeps getting worse. There are some numbers in here that genuinely surprised me, and I think they will surprise you too. The backstory you probably missed. Let's go back to where this all started because context matters here. In the early 1970s, an architect named Michael Reynolds started experimenting in New Mexico with a radical idea. What if a home could be built entirely from discarded materials, generate its own electricity, collect its own water, grow its own food, and treat its own sewage, all without being connected to any utility grid? He called these homes Earthships. And yes, the name sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but the concept was dead serious. Reynolds spent decades refining the design, fighting with building codes and licensing boards, and basically being dismissed by mainstream architecture and housing institutions. There was even a period where he lost his architectural license in New Mexico because regulators thought his methods were too experimental. But here is the thing. The people who built Earthships kept living in them. And they kept working. Fast forward to 2026 and the context has completely changed. Mortgage rates have been brutal. Rental prices in major cities have pushed working and middle-class families to the edge. A starter home in many American cities now costs $400,000 to $600,000. And a growing number of people are asking a question that would have sounded fringe 10 years ago. What if I just built something myself? That is the opening Earthships are walking right through. What is an Earthship, actually? Before we go any further, let me give you the honest breakdown of what an Earthship actually is, because there is a lot of romanticized content online that glosses over the details. At its core, an Earthship is a passive solar home built primarily from natural and recycled materials. The most iconic feature is the thermal mass walls, which are made from used car tires packed tightly with compacted earth. These walls are incredibly thick, sometimes 2 to 3 feet, and that mass absorbs heat during the day and releases it slowly at night, creating a natural temperature regulation system that dramatically reduces or eliminates the need for conventional heating and cooling. The south-facing front wall is typically all glass, angled to catch sunlight. Inside you often find built-in planters where residents grow food year-round using the gray water from sinks and showers cycling through the system. Rainwater is collected from the roof, filtered, and used for drinking and washing. Solar panels and wind turbines handle electricity. And sewage is treated on site through contained botanical cells, which is basically a series of planted beds that use biology to break down waste. The result is a home that, once built, has near zero utility bills and a drastically lower monthly cost of living. That is not a marketing claim. That is just the math of not paying electricity, water, or sewage bills every month. The numbers that are driving the comeback. Here is where it gets interesting. Let me give you some real figures. The median home price in the United States in early 2026 sits around $420,000. With a 20% down payment and current interest rates, a buyer is looking at monthly mortgage payments somewhere between $2,200 and $2,800 depending on the rate they lock in. That is before property taxes, insurance, and utilities. For a lot of people, that math simply does not work anymore. Now look at the Earthship side of the ledger. A basic self-built Earthship, if you are doing most of the labor yourself and sourcing materials creatively, can come in between $15,000 and $50,000 in materials costs. A professionally designed and contractor-built Earthship, using the plans and guidance from outfits like Earthship Biotecture, runs more like $150 to $250 per square foot for a finished build. For a 1,200 square foot home that puts you at $180,000 to $300,000. That is still a lot of money. But here is what changes the equation. When your monthly utility costs drop to near zero and your mortgage or land payment is dramatically lower than a conventional home, the long-term math shifts significantly. And the land piece matters. People building Earthships are often doing it on rural or semi-rural land that is far cheaper than suburban real estate. An acre of buildable land in parts of New Mexico, West Texas, Colorado, or the rural Midwest can still be found for $5,000 to $30,000. That completely changes the calculus. The reality check. Now I want to be very honest here because this video is not a sales pitch for Earthships. There are real challenges and I would be doing you a disservice if I glossed over them. First, permits and building codes. This is the single biggest obstacle most people run into. Most American counties still do not have codes that accommodate off-grid, alternative construction methods. Getting a permit for a tire wall home can be a multi-year battle in some jurisdictions. Some people build without permits in rural areas where enforcement is minimal, but that carries real legal and resale risks. New Mexico, Colorado, and a handful of other states have made the most progress on alternative building codes, but this is still far from a smooth process nationally. Second, the labor. A self-built Earthship is genuinely hard physical work. Packing tires with earth is exhausting. It typically takes a team of people days to weeks to complete the tire walls alone. Many Earthship builders use volunteer work parties, community builds, and staged construction over years to manage this. If you are hiring it all out, the cost goes up significantly. Third, the learning curve. These systems, the water catchment, the gray water cycling, the solar setup, the botanical cells, they require ongoing maintenance and a willingness to understand how they work. This is not a conventional home where you call the utility company when something goes wrong. You are the utility company. Fourth, climate suitability. Earthships were originally designed for the high desert of New Mexico. The passive solar design works beautifully in climates with significant sun exposure and temperature swings between day and night. In consistently cloudy climates, very humid environments, or extremely cold regions, the design requires significant modification and the performance can be more variable. Why 2026 is different? So why is this happening now, specifically? A few things have converged. The housing affordability crisis has reached a point where conventional paths feel genuinely inaccessible to a large portion of the population, particularly millennials and Gen Z. When you cannot afford a conventional home, alternative options stop looking eccentric and start looking rational. At the same time, solar panel prices have dropped roughly 90% over the past 15 years. Battery storage technology has improved dramatically. This means the energy systems that once required complex and expensive setups are now far more accessible and affordable. The off-grid energy piece of an Earthship build is actually one of the easier parts of the equation now compared to even a decade ago. Social media and YouTube have also played a role that is hard to understate. Detailed build documentation, community groups, and freely shared knowledge have lowered the information barrier significantly. 10 years ago, learning to build an Earthship basically meant buying books, attending workshops in Taos, or hiring a consultant. Today there are hundreds of documented builds with granular cost breakdowns, timelines, and lessons learned available for free. And there is a genuine cultural shift happening around ownership, sustainability, and self-sufficiency. The pandemic accelerated a lot of rethinking about remote work, urban density, and what people actually want from their living situation. For a meaningful slice of the population, a low-cost, self-sufficient home on land they own outright, even if it required years of work to build, has become a genuinely appealing life design. What a real build looks like. Let me paint you a realistic picture of what a first-time Earthship build often looks like, because the glossy photos on Instagram do not always tell the full story. A fairly typical path for an individual or couple goes something like this. They spend 1 to 3 years researching, visiting existing Earthships, and attending workshops. They purchase land, often in the $5,000 to $40,000 range depending on location. They spend another 1 to 2 years navigating permitting, which in some cases means working with the county to get an alternative construction permit or an owner-builder exemption. They begin collecting tires, often for free from tire shops that are happy to have someone haul them away. They organize multiple work parties over several months or years to complete the tire walls. They bring in or learn to install the solar, water, and sewage systems themselves or with a trusted contractor. And then they move in. Total timeline from land purchase to move in: frequently 3 to 7 years for a self-managed owner-builder project. Total cash investment? Often $30,000 to $80,000 for a modest but fully functional home, not counting the land. That sounds like a long time. And it is. But consider the alternative. A 30-year mortgage on a $400,000 home means you will spend the next 3 decades working to pay it off, at a total repayment cost that often exceeds $700,000 with interest. The Earthship path is not faster. But it leads somewhere very different financially. The community angle. One thing that does not get talked about enough is how community-driven the Earthship movement has always been. The tire packing process is genuinely too labor-intensive for 1 or 2 people to do quickly. What has evolved around this necessity is a culture of collaborative building. Groups form, skills get shared, and people end up building multiple homes together over time, each household helping the next. There are now established Earthship communities in New Mexico, Europe, Australia, and increasingly in other parts of the United States. These are not communes in the countercultural sense. They are more like neighborhoods where people chose a shared approach to building and living. Some are very loose, just a few households sharing a road or a water well. Others are more intentionally organized. The point is that the social infrastructure around Earthship building has matured significantly, which lowers the barrier for newcomers. The honest verdict. So let me give you my honest take after going deep on this. Earthships are not for everyone. They require a significant investment of time, physical labor, problem solving, and patience with systems that are fundamentally different from conventional housing. If you are not someone who enjoys learning how things work and maintaining them yourself, this path will be genuinely difficult. But for a growing segment of the population, particularly people who are priced out of conventional housing, who value self-sufficiency, who are willing to invest years of work into building equity in a non-conventional way, and who are drawn to a lower-cost, lower-footprint way of living, Earthships represent something that is actually quite rare in the current housing landscape. A legitimate alternative that does not require you to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. The reason they are having a comeback in 2026 is not mystical. It is economic. When the mainstream path becomes genuinely unaffordable for a large portion of the population, people look for other paths. Earthships have been sitting there quietly, working well, and waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to the problem they were designed to solve. Where to start if you are curious? If this video has sparked genuine curiosity, here is where I would point you. The Earthship Biotecture website and Michael Reynolds's books are still the foundational resources. There are several excellent documentary films, including Garbage Warrior, which follows Reynolds's legal battle to build in New Mexico and is absolutely worth watching. On YouTube, channels documenting real owner-builder Earthship projects with honest cost breakdowns and timelines are incredibly valuable. And if you can visit an existing Earthship before committing to anything, do it. The experience of being inside one and talking to people who live there is irreplaceable. There are also weekend and week-long workshops at the Earthship headquarters in Taos, New Mexico where you can get hands-on experience before deciding if this path is right for you. If you made it this far, thank you genuinely. This is the kind of topic I think deserves a serious, honest look rather than either dismissal or hype, and I hope this gave you something real to think about. If you found this useful, hit the like button because it genuinely helps this video reach people who are looking for exactly this kind of information. Subscribe if you want more honest dives into alternative housing, building, and financial independence strategies. And drop a comment below. I want to know, would you ever consider building an Earthship? What is the biggest thing holding you back? I read every comment and I actually respond. See you in the next one.